is it if you're not being born, then you're busy aging? Is that how you phrase it?
Yeah. If you're not too busy being born, you're too busy aging.
I love that so much and connect with that so much in my story with her, because I feel like that was kind of the pivot I took of, okay, I want to live. I always say I want to live and love as big as I can.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
And now the podcast where together we discuss proactive aging on your terms, connecting to the professional advice of our special guests while creating better days throughout the aging process. Now here's your host, Mark Turnbull.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another lively discussion on aging today. We are the podcast where together we're exploring the many options to aging on your terms. You can find Aging Today and our past 8 years of programming. Yes, we've been on the air for 8 years, over 500 episodes about aging and aging on your terms. You can follow us. All you got to do is go to 𝗀𝗚today.us. That's my website. And then for those of you that would rather follow on podcasts, we're on many of them, Spotify, Pandora, Apple, iHeart, and now YouTube. So you can follow us wherever you'd like. And then also, as we always want to know, I just want to say thank you, all of the followers out there. There's been over 200,000 of you over the 8 years that have followed us, and I want to say thank you. And if you have any other questions on the aging process, reach out to me, your host, Mark Turnbull, and my email is mark@agingtoday.us. It's Mark with a K at agingtoday.us. And as you know, this is a podcast about aging, and we always say if you're not too busy being born, you're too busy aging. And it doesn't matter at what age you are, we are all aging. And there are those villains that come into our lives and disrupt our aging process. They disrupt our lives. And we're just trying to figure out how to live successfully, how to live our best lives possible as we're on this earth and as we traverse it together. So we have been blessed to have an incredible personality on the show today, and I'm so looking forward to it because we're going to talk about one of those villains. It's called frontotemporal dementia or frontotemporal what's the other word, the D word? It's degenerate, yeah. And so we're going to be talking about that, and here to guide us along the way and tell her story about how this particular villain interrupted and came into her life. It is Katie Prentiss. She is an actress, a filmmaker, and also a caregiver, a full-time caregiver. Not only a caregiver to 4 of her own children, but later she became a caregiver to her mom. So we're going to be talking to her. Katie, welcome to Aging Today.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you on Aging Today. And we share we're fellow neighbors in a city here in Portland. So it's nice to have somebody close by. So
absolutely. We love the Pacific Northwest for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you look familiar, and maybe I don't know if it was on the screen or if I've seen you walking the streets, someplace, but you do look familiar, and so I'm excited to hear your story. We always start out Aging Today with, not so much what's in your wallet, although if you want to share that, we're totally okay with that. But what's in your story? And so tell us a little bit about Katie Prentiss and how you got to this place.
Yeah, it's a great question because I would say my life took a sharp turn when I discovered my mom's diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia, or we call it FTD for short as well. I have 4 kids. I was been a portrait photographer for 17 years now, and I was fairly content managing those 2 things in my life, my own business and my large family, and wasn't too far. And I was like upper 30s, lower 40s when my mom's behavior started to change. And we started to be really curious about what was going on with her. Fast forward through multiple doctor's appointments and lots of questions, we discovered that she had frontotemporal dementia. I had never heard of that. I heard the word dementia. I was confused by it because my mother at that point was only 62. And so it felt really confusing. I was, I don't even remember how old. I mean, maybe around 40 at that point. And my sister and brother and I were just scrambling with what to do and how to help her. But things progressed fairly quickly, and we found ourselves volunteering to move Mom to Oregon. She was in Georgia with my other siblings at that point. So we moved Mom into our home and was able to be her caregiver for about 6 months in our home, and then her remaining year and a half here in Oregon. We lost Mom when she was 68. I had never acted or made a film at that point. But as you know, as most of us have, if you have experienced any type of grief in your life, you know how quickly it can change your life. And I feel like one of my mom's gifts to me was to, in losing her, was to think about how I wanted to live my life as big as I can. I love your statement about if you're not being born, then you're busy aging? Is that how you phrase it?
Yeah. If you're not too busy being born, you're too busy aging.
I love that so much and connect with that so much in my story with her. Because, I feel like that was kind of the pivot I took of, okay, I want to live. I always say I want to live and love as big as I can. And I definitely look back to that loss with Mom and that crisis and journey with her to how that came to be in my life now. So
and 68 is young. I'm 67, so I can relate to that number. Yeah, and that'd be way, way, way too young.
Exactly. Yeah. And my children were young, and it was very confusing because most people, when you say dementia, they say, "Oh, my grandmother had dementia," or my parents, and you ask how old, and it's often 80s. And so it's like still very, very sad. I don't mean to diminish anyone's pain in that, but it's like when you're in you're dealing with your parent who's in their prime still, you're like, wait, but this isn't that, It's super confusing.
It certainly is. So let's start out with a good definition of dementia. So is that something that you can address or?
Dementia, I can tell you this. I'm not an expert in dementia whatsoever. Okay. Again, my own process with my mom, when they said frontotemporal dementia, I was so overwhelmed by everything that I didn't even do a lot of research in that phase of my life. It wasn't until I lost her and I started making films that I started learning more and connecting more with the FTD community specifically. But I can share this. Dementia is the umbrella. It's not an official diagnosis. Under that umbrella is all types of dementias. Alzheimer's is included. Frontotemporal dementia is included. And even within frontotemporal dementia, there's different strains and types. There's primary progressive aphasia, which is what my mom had, where she lost her ability to speak. And then there's Lewy body dementia, which is under the FTD umbrella, I believe. And then there's behavioral variant under FTD, which really affects someone's personality. And they might be someone who is the kindest soul ever, and then they become angry or aggressive. And so people are very confused by those behavioral changes. So that's a little snippet of what I understand for dementia.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct. Dementia is an umbrella term, and a lot of people get confused with that word.
Yes.
It sounds like a disease. It's not really a disease. What it is, it's a description of what's happening to your brain. The brain is dying. How? What's causing it? And there are many types of diseases that affect our brains, Alzheimer's being probably the most prevalent. But your mom was diagnosed with frontotemporal, degenerative dementia. And that is, there's not that many, in comparison to Alzheimer's, there's not that many people that are living with that one.
Yeah, that one is, I will say, the hardest part about FTD is that it often gets misdiagnosed, and it can take an average of 3.5 years to get an accurate diagnosis. So I believe that there's probably a lot of people that have frontotemporal degeneration or dementia that don't even know. Yeah. And you're right. I mean, I think Alzheimer's we all are more familiar with, where, you see the memory change and the memory being affected, whereas FTD is the most common type of dementia under the age of 65, which is, I think, really helpful to know for people who are seeing their loved ones exhibiting signs or different behavioral changes. They can maybe look into FTD as an option.
Yeah. It's, it's interesting how many variants or types of dementias there are. And they all have their downsides. There's nothing exciting about, acquiring any of those diseases. But, what were some of the things that you saw, the changes in your mom that you go, Mom, there's something going on? Or did your mom come to you and say, Katie, there's something going on here and I can't put my finger on it?
My mom didn't really ask that question herself. I think she had to have been confused, but my mom was such a little happy-go-lucky person and so sweet. There was so much about her personality that was just so sweet and lovable, but she also was kind of quirky. Like, even growing up, I remember in high school feeling like she didn't always catch social cues or anything. So there were already certain things about her that I felt like I had to explain or would confuse me growing up as her child.
Yeah.
So that I say that because as I think her FTD was progressing, we weren't quick to notice some of the changes with her, but she started becoming almost like more obsessive about certain behaviors and habits that she had. So she was always good with recycling, but then it got to where she had like a closet full of recycling. And we were like, why is all of this in here? So we would notice little things and we kind of think, I wrote it off as, oh, well, she lives alone. So no one's there to like tell her to not do that. She's not bothering anyone else with some of these behaviors. But then she started sharing things that I later found out were delusions. And I say later because at first she would share things that sounded pretty normal. Like she would say, oh, there was a man in my backyard. And I was like, who? What? And she would say, oh, it was a man and his son. And I was like, well, who were they? And she'd say, I don't know. And I'd be like, well, what did you hear them say? And she was like, they were just talking. I couldn't hear them. And I would ask questions and it sounded all like reasonable. But of course, like I'm living far from her and I'd get worried. I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, who's in her backyard? So then as time moved on, her stories became more extreme. Like she would share about a school bus of children being let out into her yard, or she told me about a couple who were digging a hole through her roof. So once I started hearing some of those stories, I called my sister and I was like, we have to get her into a doctor. I don't know what's going on. Like, she doesn't really drink, like maybe some meds are off. And the first doctor we took her to was a psychiatrist, and they said she has a delusional disorder. She can't drive or live alone. And this was like before 62. Like she was like, wow, 60, 61.
Did you see any of those behavioral patterns starting to develop in her 30s and 40s and 50s? Or did it all of a sudden just come on the scene?
That's the part I don't know. It's tricky because my mom also had, the neurologist says this isn't related to FTD, and I don't think scientifically it is, but my mom did have a major car accident when I was in college. So she was, I can't do math really fast, but she was younger. She was probably early 50s, I guess, at that point. And she, or maybe mid 50s, but she had a car accident. And I remember thinking like her emotional response to life shifted after that. Mm-hmm. But here's the confusing part. The neurologist said that they didn't see any damage from like an accident in her brain to signify the diagnosis of FTD. Like they didn't see any correlations.
Yeah. Sure. Unlike what's happening in modern sports today with concussions and things like that are they're finding that that's contributing to many dementias. Yeah.
Right. And I kind of wonder, well, we know so little about the brain. We're just like starting to learn more about the brain. So part of me was like, well, I don't know if I can even trust that, because what do we know? With traumatic brain injury, especially. But the information I have now is that her younger brother is also diagnosed with FTD in the last year or two. He's in his 70s. So I do know now that as much as I would love for her diagnosis to be related to her accident, because it means less genetic possibility for me and my family. And her brother being diagnosed kind of goes, oh, okay, well, that's probably, then we have a genetic strain of some kind, or we're likely going to have one.
That was one of the things I was going to ask you. Is it familial? Did her mom and dad experience? No. Well,
I mean, we didn't see anything like this in her parents nor her other siblings. Oh, it's so confusing, and I don't know. I think looking back, for sure, I didn't quite answer your question earlier about did we see signs in her 30s, 40s, 50s. I did share about the accident, but I think looking back now that I understand FTD more, I think, oh, there's no telling. Like, there's no telling. Like, she could have been experiencing this, like, way earlier on, but we just didn't have any wherewithal. And I think a lot of people, like a lot of us, if we experience, like, any kind of decline, we don't really want to talk about it because it doesn't feel good, you know? Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I'm gonna read some of the symptoms that I looked up and tell me which ones your mom was experiencing.
Okay,
if any. So disinhibition. That's the the offensive comments and things like that. It's ignoring other people's personal space, shoplifting, some of the behaviors that come out of that, reckless spending, touching strangers, inappropriate sexual behavior, aggressive outbursts. That's just one. Okay, so was she experiencing any of those types of symptoms?
My mom didn't really have the behavioral variant, so she was getting like quieter and smaller. I will say that she was very susceptible to scams, and so she did give money to someone who was calling her and saying that they wanted to marry her, and she was like mail ordering a lot. So there was some like compulsion control issues with her. It was more like spending and like ordering stuff online. But it was less like a shift in her personality.
Gotcha.
Like with some of the behaviorals.
So with temporal, there's a behavioral element, and what's the other elements that maybe your mom, she wasn't leaning towards the behavioral, she was leaning more towards.
Yeah, she had a variant called primary progressive aphasia, which is the loss of ability to speak. Also affects like your handwriting and all of your communication. So with my mom, we saw a shutting down of her personality, a shutting down of her ability to speak. She definitely had compulsion control with like food and drink. She was very like food fixated and beverage fixated. But really, yeah, it was just like when she did speak, as she progressed, it became a whisper. She had a lot of repeating of the same phrases. She would say, okay, okay, okay. And she would say, let's go a lot. Those were kind of her too. But I know other people with primary progressive aphasia might do a, like a catchphrase that we all use. They might repeat that over and over again. So it's kind of like what they can access verbally easily. So, so that was my mom's is more of it just becoming more quiet and less personality, period. Like she didn't show expressions very much on her face. It was so interesting, Mark, because anytime I took a photo of her, she would smile. Like she was aware enough to know that there was a camera and she could make herself smile. But in general, she never expressed that way. So it would almost frustrate me in this weird way because she looked as if she was aware and present when she really wasn't. And like, I don't know. It's like you want people to know like what you're dealing with and like how hard it feels or how lonely it feels when you see your loved one disappearing in front of you. And so when she would smile, I'd be like, that's not even real. Like, that's so frustrating. Yeah. I don't know. It was just one of those things, I guess.
Yeah. So the first step that you took is you went to a psychologist. Mm-hmm. And then where did your journey lead you next?
Yeah.
Was it to a neurologist or where did they go?
Mm-hmm. So that was my sister. So my sister took my mom in because they were all both in Georgia. My sister took her to a psychiatrist. We got the delusional disorder diagnosis or suggestion and said that mom shouldn't drive or live alone. So my sister and I were scrambling. What do we do? It was October. And my sister was like, she can come live with us and we both said, we'll get through the holidays and we'll figure out what to do next, because it just felt so like such a big decision thrown on us. So my mom came to live with my sister through the holidays. It became more and more apparent that mom needed more help. They put her on some medications at one point that were horrible. Like she turned into more of a zombie. Like she would just sit there like, not able to like keep slobber from coming out of her mouth, stuff like that. It was like very sedating. So then I'm trying to remember the order, but I know that eventually my sister got her into a neurologist and was able to do a brain scan. And that is when we got the diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia. And that was probably, I wish my sister would know, but I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it probably was at least a year in between that first visit and then the official diagnosis. And then you have all the like practical reality of like trying to get your parent into doctor's office when they have no means of income and like trying to figure out the housing situation. My mom ended up living with my sister for 2 years. And then when they were kind of at their end with caring for her, I was like, I can't have mom go to a nursing home at this point because I felt like I hadn't been able to engage in the way I wanted to engage. And so my husband and I made the decision to have mom move out to Oregon. And I'm really glad, even though those years were really brutal to witness, I knew that I needed to be present with her at her end of life. I needed to be able to touch her and be with her. And I knew that's what I would want down the road when I looked back. So,
and it's such a great gift to be able to give back to your mom who gave that gift to you of life. And she was your caregiver. And, I mean, that's how I look at it. 'Cause I'm in a similar situation. Mom and dad were at that place where they needed more assistance in their home. So we decided, I own an in-home care agency and a hospice agency. So, I'm skilled in and can handle that, but that doesn't mean that everybody should.
Right.
And it's hard, even for me.
Hard.
And it's not an easy road to go down. But I'm grateful that I'm here and giving her best life, just like you did.
Yeah, it is such a gift for everyone involved if you can do it. I think that, I remember thinking like, oh, this will be easy because the love's there. But then I think because you're also experiencing so much layers of loss on such a deep personal level, I realized that caregivers that didn't have a relationship with mom had a sense of ease that I didn't have because they weren't losing anything of her that they knew. Yeah. They could just be with her in the moment. And I do think that that's the thing with dementia or caregiving is like the more you can stay present, like with exactly where you are, the better. Yeah. But you're grieving the past and you're fearing the future. And that's like such a hard sandwich to be in the middle of.
Oh, it is. It is.
For sure.
And I love your word, the presence, being present. And, you know, one of the things that I've always appreciated about our caregivers, and we've had hundreds of them, if not thousands of them over the years, they're incredible people. And the best ones, they had that innate gift and ability to stay present. Yes. And those were the people that are game changers, that make a difference in somebody's life. Yeah.
Caregivers are angels.
Did you know that you're not too old or too late to pivot and try a new career? I made my first film in 2020, and now I'm making my first full-length movie in 2025. Follow 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗀𝗀 to find out more. This Did You Know moment was provided by today's guest and is brought to you by Royal Hospice of Oregon.
So let's get back to a little bit about, you know, you brought mom home with you, and you were not only a full-time caregiver to 4, or should I say 5 boys, including your husband, right?
Yeah.
So you had 5 that you were caring for. And then all of a sudden now, you know, what does that feel like, you know, having to take on now your mom? Because you always looked, here's the thing that is really strange for me. I always looked up to my mom as the caregiver, and now the roles are reversed, and it's such a weird place to be.
Yeah, it's so strange, isn't it? And it's like, I think especially with the mom, because our moms tend to be like the soft play. I don't know if you had a good experience with your mom, like they can be like such a soft healing place for us. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm caregiving for the person that would be amazing as a caregiver, the person that was an amazing caregiver. And she also would be such a comfort to me in this crisis. I wish I could lean on her, but she's the one I'm caring for. Yeah, you know, when we brought mom into our home, I think my sister was in survival mode until we got mom to our house. And I don't think my sister was in a place where she could really articulate like how progressed mom's needs were. But I also think, that it's kind of like any kind of growth or decline. It's hard to see sometimes when it's right under your nose. And so when mom came to our house, she was way more progressed than I realized. Pretty quickly realized she was dealing with incontinence. Like she was in an unhealthy way, eating so much food and drinking all of our beverages, like right from in front of you kind of thing. And I worried so much about her getting worse or sicker while she was with us. I think that, you know, you think your kids don't notice, but like so much of my kids, like homework, they would like turn in writing pieces that I would read later and see that it was like a poem about my mom living with us, you know, like you realize how affected they are by it as well. It was tough. It was tough juggling all of that, trying to keep my business afloat. Our kids were little angels about it all, but it felt like my mom was the most difficult of all to, you know, in the mix of having so many different needs. And Yeah, we were living off of fumes, I think, and
Yeah.
we eventually did have to place Mom in a home, and it was a really, really, really tough decision, but it was a better decision for all of us.
Yeah.
Her care just became too much for us.
Yeah, the impact that also would have on your children.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that. Was it a positive impact? Are they more empathetic young people today, or describe how that worked with them?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that I saw so much support and empathy coming out from our kids. I think they, we always say they like repeat what they see more than what they hear, and I think what our kids watching us give care to our parents is a really beautiful thing. I definitely think that they were affected in the sense that, they're already sharing parents, by 4. So there's already a lot of children and
Now, how old were your children when Mom moved in?
Yeah, my oldest was, I want to say, I should know these ages. I think my oldest was in 7th grade. And then we had 5th, 3rd, and 1st.
Yeah. Maybe
kindergarten.
So they were in primary schools and,
Yeah.
and the mid-junior high area. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are tough years for your children, just being able to identify who they are and as they're growing up and how
Right.
they're fitting in. And then you insert Mom into the picture.
Yeah.
And, sometimes those are good things. I remember, a TV show, it may be too old for you, but, and many of our listening audience, but the Waltons, and it was, families living in the household and
The multi-generations.
the multi-generational thing that, and there's a lot of good things that can come out of that.
I think so too. And, we made the choice to move so far away from our family, and that has been hard. But I do think like it's that bittersweet. Like I don't regret my children being around my mom in the last years of her life. I do feel sad that it was when she was so ill and wasn't really herself. But I think that it's a good, excuse me, my stomach is being very loud. We're going to cut that. I do think that the experience for them 100% gave more compassion and empathy to people with any kind of mental health issues. But also I felt so much strong support from our kids,
Sure.
whether it be like coming with me to visit Mom or the support they gave when I was grieving losing her was huge too.
And these are great teaching moments too, for empathy and for caring for one another. And, sometimes I think we've gotten away from that ability to train our children up and being more responsible to, the downtimes of others or responding to, everybody's challenges in life. And so there's that empathy that can come out. And children are amazingly resilient. They really are. And they can adapt. They can adapt better than you and me.
Totally. Yeah. They're amazing for sure. Yeah. It was ultimately, I think it's important. Our culture doesn't really have a way of processing death so much, and we definitely don't feel comfortable talking about it. So I think in some ways it's like a good thing for any of us to have to really deal with it, to like be present in someone's death and loss in a way that it helps shape us in our life choices, and then also just to know how you would want to process other loss in your future.
Yeah. I was just looking at some of the other symptoms of FTD, and one of those is the eating. There's binge eating going on, the high craving towards carbohydrates and sugars and things like that. It sounded like that's what your mom was battling with as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I heard compulsion control when she was diagnosed, and so I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like she doesn't know when to stop, with drinking or eating something. So, yeah.
How about with any of the, compulsive, like repeating of words and phrases over? And did you experience that as well?
Yeah, my mom would also like move. I know your hearers can't see my hands, but she would just, constantly like move her hands back and forth on top of each other and self-soothe that way. But she would repeat, okay, 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 all the time.
Yeah.
And she would say, let's go all the time. She didn't want to be left alone very much. And so she'd always try to go with me anytime. I almost had to like try and leave where she wouldn't see so that she wouldn't try to go too. So yeah, she definitely repeated the phrases. So
yeah. Yeah. And those are challenging. I mean, those behaviors and then how do you respond? What did you learn from those days and how to respond and to diffuse, some of the behaviors? It's a real art, and there's there's not really any consistency in because they are such challenging behaviors. So how did you deal with all that?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, you have to make difficult choices for our own safety. Like we were like, we have to get a fridge that we can lock because Mom will drink everything. Which is just like, you think it's not good. Like she came to dinner one time with a glass full of what looked like milk, and I knew we didn't have any milk, and so I was super confused. And I was like, what do you have? And as soon as I asked her what she had, she like drank it all the way down, and then I realized it was coffee creamer. It was half and half. Oh, and wow. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm just imagining that, like sitting on your belly, like a full glass of half and half. So like, choosing tough things like buying a fridge that we could lock, but also, trying to just sit with her and be with her and figure out like something she could do. We tried to, I remember like I was making Christmas cards, sending Christmas cards. And so I'd have her like stick the dress or the stamps on them just to allow her to participate and give her something she could do. But I wish I could say I was like incredibly patient with her, but there were plenty of times where I would feel really frustrated and I might have to just like remove myself from the scenario because like I said earlier, like as her daughter, it brings up anger because fear and sadness are harder to access for us. So if we get angry, it's because we're feeling that fear and sadness. But with her, I'd be like, why are you doing that? Because I didn't understand as fully as I could have what we've been dealing with. So
yeah. And I think
it's tough.
Yeah, caregivers, adult children as caregivers to mom and dad, oftentimes feel the guilt and the shame and the judgment. And, because you feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing it well enough. And how did you deal with all of that? Did you have support systems in place? Did you have an outlet, other than, say, your business? I mean, that is an outlet, but were there other things, friends, whatever?
I think this is the hardest part about caregiving is you're so stretched thin and you're in crisis. It feels like all the time putting out fires. This is maybe this is bizarre or less common, but one thing that felt like a good outlet to me is and I didn't realize this until I did it, but I posted a thing on social media and just hashtagged dementia sucks or something like that. And people started commenting or connecting that way. And I realized, other people understand what I'm going through. And I felt less alone. So I definitely think that helped, like reaching out and sharing a little bit of my story, just as a way to feel like less invisible in it and less lonely in it. And then connecting with people through that sharing was really, really powerful. And honestly, it was that connection that made me realize I wanted to make films about this this topic. And like, because I realized if connecting with one person on our story was that helpful to me, how much more helpful would it be to make a film where who knows who can watch it, where it can go into people's living room and they feel like their lives are being expressed, that they can see their experience being lived out on the screen. So it's highly motivating. And then the other thing that helps me with the guilt that you asked about is, maybe this is particular to me and my mom, but when I would feel like I was so overwhelmed by my own lack of ability to love or care for her in the way that I really, really wanted to, I thought about my mom would be the first person to forgive me, the first person to say it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think just allowing myself to feel that love and to know that she would have given me that, the very person I was trying to love, was like super healing to me. And I'm like, if mom could forgive that, then I can forgive myself for not living up to the way I wanted to do things. And some of the things that I've heard since then, because it has been 8 years since I've lost my mom, but one of the things I heard is like, it's more regret than it is guilt, because regret is about how we wish we could have loved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. It's that regret. Sometimes those negative thoughts overtake us, and it's really important to, keep a sound mind and to keep everything into perspective. And I love the way you said that, because you knew your mom. Your mom knew you. And moms are great at forgiveness. They really are.
Yeah. I have to cough one more time.
That's all right. That's okay.
and
what?
Trying to stifle the cry, it makes you get choked up in more than ways than one.
Yeah. But one of the things that you write about is, well, let me back up a little bit. So I was asking you about what your outlets were. Did you have friends? Because a lot of people have friends. Some people have, there's spiritual group of people around them with church or various, or maybe even at the hospital they had FTD groups, support groups, and there's all kinds of ways to have your outlet to keep your sanity. Right. And one of the things that was intriguing about your story is that you were an actress. And as an actress, then you became a filmmaker, and now this is your outlet to begin to let all of those things out and to help others walk through this most difficult journey of FTD. Yes. And so talk a little bit about that expression for you. Not everybody can be a film director. Not everybody can be an actress. Well, I guess we're all actors and actresses in this world, but... but this is unique to you.
Yeah, what a wild turn of events. I started acting after I lost my mom to FTD. And I will say the first step or the first outlet was that I remember thinking so much about life is short. And I was like, why not try new things? Why not live? Why not grow and stretch myself and do things that scare me? And so I started acting, and I was terrified because, it's such a public it's such a public art form. You can't just paint in your back room and then nobody sees it. If you're going to act, whether it's acting class or any kind of film or on camera or stage performance, people are going to see it. And people get really nervous for you when you try to take a risk like that, like a really public risk. They project their fears onto you and react all sorts of ways. So started acting very quickly into that journey. I thought I wanted to try my hand at filmmaking. And like I said earlier, I thought, what a beautiful way.
You started acting at you weren't in your teens, you weren't a child actor, you started later in life, correct? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And what age
Yes.
were you? What was that, in your 30s, your 40s? I don't even know
I
how
started
old you are.
after I. That's okay. I normally don't. I don't always share my age. I don't. I love aging. It's such a privilege, but I don't share my age because of acting. Like I want to be cast in how old I look.
I think it's
how old I am.
Sure, and I think it's inspiring for people that know. It doesn't matter. Age is a number, and it doesn't really matter when you start. It's that you started. It's not that you. It's getting to the starting line in a race. It's just showing up first of all. Yeah. So then in this is more midlife for you that this came about. And there's a big risk.
I am losing you, I think.
Oh no, I was just waiting for your response. So it was a big risk for you to start a career in acting. You started and then it evolved into filmmaking, and then you've taken your mom's story and you've woven that into your craft.
Yes. So in some ways acting was a big risk, right? Because it's vulnerable. But in other ways, it's not a big risk at all, because what do we have to lose? It's like I've already have a full life. I have a beautiful family. I have a career that I love doing portrait photography. Why not try new things? So I started acting, and it was a risk, but not really, because I feel like none of us really have anything to lose when it's all said and done, So I made my first film loosely based on my experience with mom's dementia, and that was in 2020. And so that film was very, like you said, it was a way for me to process my own experience, my own grief, and also connect with this community and hopefully create something that helped other people and help people feel less alone. I thought that I would make that film and that would be it. And we would be like, oh, we made a film about dementia. And I didn't know that I would want to like work in that space more, because it does cause me and force me to really deal with my own grief and deal with my own experience in a deep way. So it's deeper work is what I would call it. But what
was the title of the film?
That's called Front Porches.
Okay. And this was centered and foundational to your mom's experience of living with FTD, correct?
Yeah, I centered that story specifically on two neighbors and their connection to each other, because we filmed it in the pandemic. And I was like, this is so important that we actually know our neighbors, that we know how to rely on people, that we can have a chosen family sometimes. It doesn't always have to be our immediate family. And it was two women who became like mother-daughter to each other. And they both were experiencing neglect in their lives, and they leaned on each other. And what happened is they both started noticing some mental issues, a mental decline in the older neighbor's life. And so it was really focused on those beginning stages of dementia where you see someone you love starting to behave differently, or like miss things or feel confused. And so I really wanted to just create a short film just on that beginning phase where you don't quite know what's going on, and help people feel like, oh, I can recognize that. I remember how confusing that time was when you're not sure what's going to happen or how you're going to care for this person. So Front Porches is just a little slice of that. It's a 18-minute long film.
And it was your first attempt.
Mm-hmm. It's
nice.
My first film. Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you. And honestly, when you've never done something like that, I'm like, I hope I can finish this, or my goal is to finish this. And but it ended up way better than I ever imagined. And I think the thing is that film continues to have an impact, and it continues to because, I mean, people still reach out and say, can I see your film? And I'm like, what? You know, like, it's not even like on any kind of platform, like a streaming network or anything, you know, and people want to see it. So I think because of the nerve that touched, I really felt like a calling to create a full-length movie about the same thing, like caregiving, dementia. I felt like I thought I can do more, and I thought I could do better than that first attempt. Sure. And as I've grown as an artist, but also as I've grown in like my understanding of the whole process of what I went through with Mom, I was like, okay, I think I can write I want to make a full-length film. I want to make a full movie. I needed to figure out the story because it's the Wake Up Maggie is what I'm working on now. It's my full-length movie, and it's a different context. It's a different story. It's a different relationship. However, it's going to really highlight caregiving and specifically FTD in some similar ways. So the stories are completely different between Front Porches and Wake Up Maggie, but I will say like the truth of both of the stories are the same because it's based on what I know, and it's all very true things that have happened. So
you write about how this was a wake-up call for you in the process. What were you waking up from? And I was curious about what was your life like? Where then there's the bell is ringing, and we all have those moments in our lives, and we all wake up. Hopefully, you know, not all of us, but hopefully we will. Yeah. And those are life-changing moments. What was that like?
I mean, my wake-up call was about being busy being born, Mark. This is what's so beautiful is Wake Up Maggie is such a reflection on my life set in a fictional context, but it's about moving through midlife, feeling like you have a sense of control. You kind of know what's what. You can kind of like hold everything together until you can't. And often caregiving or great loss is the thing that makes us realize we can't. We don't control the things that we're thinking we can control. And I think letting go of trying to control what I cannot control and moving into acceptance of the things I can't control was like the most peaceful, like the most peace-inducing lesson. That's the hardest to learn. I'm still learning it all the time. So I think for me, I look at this journey, and I say this in my film with Wake Up Maggie too. It's about being unraveled in midlife. It is about life circumstances coming at you, and we have a choice. We can become stiffer. We can become more closed. We can become escape seekers, comfort seekers, or we can lean in, feel what we need to feel, and let it strip away all those layers that don't really serve us anymore. For me, that was a lot of people pleasing. That was a high lack of boundaries in my life. It was putting every single person first besides me. It was, constantly choosing what I was going to do based on the fictional question of what other people would think. And all of those things were, I mean, in a lot of ways, those things are still at my core. They're still like kind of my identity. You know, I think people pleasers are often like really easy people to be around because we know how to work the room. In the negative sense, it's like we lose ourselves. In the positive sense, we like can be really winsome. So I think for me, that journey of losing my mom and some other grief that has happened in my life is more about giving me the ultimate clarity of how I want to live. The ultimate clarity of I want presence, I want acceptance, I want to do things that scare me, I want to love people as big as I can while I can. And so making a movie is such a huge endeavor. It's like we joke, my husband and I joke about how it feels like planning a wedding, starting a business, and moving all at the same time. you know? And it's wild, but it's so exciting too. It's exciting to do things that you don't know if you can do.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. I think I was as I was listening to you, I was, thinking about all of us are looking for meaning in life. We're looking for purpose in life. And, sometimes these events reshape our minds and our thoughts about what is really important in life and what is the meaning for life. And I was reminded of, as you were talking there, I was reminded of in the book of Ecclesiastes, when I first read this, I was like, how morbid. But it says, it's better for a man in not just gender, but man, to go to a house of mourning than it is to go to a house of parting. And I go, really? That's so morbid, But really what the intent behind that, when we go through life-changing tragedies and we see life-limiting experiences in our own lives through other people, that's a great opportunity to find out what is really the purpose and why we're here on this earth and who are we.
Right.
And that's why it's better to go to a house of mourning than it is to go to a house of parting. Because when you're going to a party, it's all about me and it's about fun, and which is not to say that there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But really the deeper meaning of life is about finding out who you are. And, sometimes I think we often look at, and I'm just throwing this out, I want you to respond on it. But when we go through tragedies in life and we have to experience other people's tragedy, like your mom, sometimes if we just looked at those as gifts, back, not for her, but a gift back to us. And those were life-changing. You said that you woke up.
Yeah.
This was a wake-up moment for you. And I look at different places in my life where I had the same thing, where these were wake-up moments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you're so right. And I think, especially like thinking about my mom being diagnosed at 62, you think, you watch your mom or your parent or your loved one decline like that, and you're like, that's not that far away. So how do I want to live? And I think for me, it's also contemplating the reality that we could have a genetic strain with FTD. So what if I got diagnosed with FTD? It's facing that fear and saying, oh, I know I can't control that. But if I did, what would I do? How would I live my life? And I'm trying to choose that regardless of whether I had a diagnosis or not. And to your point about your Ecclesiastes verse about the house of parties or house of mourning, I just was making myself run the other day, and I don't like running at all, but I was like, I'm going to go out and run.
I join you in that.
I hate running. I was like, I would rather do every other type of exercise. And I love movement, and I'm a huge supporter of healthy choices and stuff. But I'm like, ugh, running. Ugh. But I was like, I'm going to see if I can do it because I want to feel alive. Like, I think about that a lot. I want to feel alive. So I went for a run, and I ran through our local cemetery that happens to be beautiful with the trees and everything. And I was like, I'm running because I'm not dead yet. This is why I'm running today. And nothing like running through a cemetery to remind yourself that you can go a little bit further, right? Because you're not dead yet.
That's a great perspective. I love that. I'm a huge supporter of, I love going to cemeteries, and that again sounds morbid, but I enjoy going to the tombstones and seeing what people write on their tombstones, because these were real people,
right? And
they had real lives, and they were gifted and talented, and they went through time. Yeah. And I just, it's just fascinating to see. And I love the epitaphs that people write.
Yeah.
And probably the one epitaph that I've enjoyed the most reading is in a windswept cemetery in Eastern Oregon, and on this tombstone, he writes, "She's gone, and oh, how I miss her." and I go, wow, that's 𝗬𝗵𝗿𝗃. I want to be missed. What a great honor to be able to have that on your tombstone, that you were such a great human being that people now miss you.
Yes, it's so like simple and profound at the same time, right?
Yeah. There's just those moments where you just take that and you go, yes, yes, yeah.
Oh, that's so tender.
So is there anything else that you want us to go away with, any thoughts, any parting thoughts?
I hope that people will just give themselves permission to live. I feel very aligned with your message of, it sounds so cliche to be like, life is short or you only live once or any of those statements. But I think anytime we have close proximity to someone's end of life, I think we are reminded of that. And obviously, I want people to I'm such a believer in trying new things and putting yourself out there, because you never know how you might succeed and what might work out for you. And then beyond that, that's what I hope my life will inspire for others. But beyond that, I really want people to check out our movie for sure, because that's so important to me. I just am pretty obsessed with it right now, Mark.
Yeah. Well, and it's a way for you to give back. For the life that your mom had lived. Yes. It was a way for you to give back, to help others experience the joys and the heartaches and all the things that are wrapped up in that. It's a gift, but it's not always an easy one to receive. But we can all learn, and in the end, it's about the purpose and meaning of life. Right. Who are we? Who do we want to become?
Yes, and I think, to your point, our stories matter. Our stories matter. Sharing our stories matter. That as a podcaster, how many stories you get to hear and share with the world. It's such a beautiful gift. But I think for me, I really do hope this film and believe that this movie, Wake Up Maggie, will be healing and hopeful to a lot of people who feel very alone and very invisible in their life right now. So I can't wait for the world to have it. Yeah.
When is it coming out? Do you have
We're hoping to film in February of 2025. So
nice.
We'll be filming it next year, and then it will probably take about a year for post-production. So movies are a long marathon of love, is the way I'm going to call it.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck with it, and we wish it well and the whole process, and because it will be a gift to the rest of us.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. It's definitely my calling in life. So it feels good to get to do work that I love this much.
And you have a website that people may want to go to where they can find your other movie. What was it? Something about the porches.
Front porches.
Front porches. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're all good.
And then they can follow you along the way. What's your website?
The easiest website to remember is just my name, 𝗀𝗵𝗃 We also have a website for Wake Up Maggie. It's at 𝗀𝗵𝗃𝗍.com. And we're on all the social media as well under Wake Up Maggie Movie. So try to make it as easy as possible for people to find us.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to it coming out. And Katie, once again, thank you so much for being on the podcast Aging Today.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
All right. It was a pleasure. This is Mark Turnbull, your host, and I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Aging Today. And we are the podcast where together we're exploring the many options to aging on your terms. Join us every Monday when we release a new conversation on Aging Today to your favorite podcast channel. And remember this, we're all in the process of aging, and as we age, we really are better together. So stay young at heart.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel like spring has sprung. And every time I see your face, I'm such a happy individual. The moment that you speak, I want to go play hide and seek. I want to go and bounce the moon just like a toy balloon. Well, you and I are just like a couple of tots running across the meadow, picking up lots of forget-me-nots. So you made me feel so young. You made me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be fun. And even when I'm old and gray.
You've been listening to Aging Today, where together we explore the options to aging on your terms. Join Mark and his guest next week for another lively discussion on proactively aging on your terms, connecting you to the professional advice of his special guests, with the goal of creating better days throughout the aging process. Your host has been Mark Turnbull. Join Mark and his guests every week on Aging Today, your podcast to exploring your options for aging on your terms.
And even when I'm old and gray, you make me feel the way I feel today. 'Cause you make me feel so. You make me feel so. You make me feel so young. So young. You make me feel so young. You make me feel so young.